Today on an all-new Dr. Phil. Terrell spent more than a decade in prison for a crime he did not commit.
Once they started accusing me of the rape and the murder, I immediately asked for my mother.
What'd they say?
You're never gonna see your mother again.
So Brendan Dassey, 16-year-old special education student, you bring that kid alone inside an interrogation room. No mom, no dad, no lawyer.
He didn't have any idea what he confessed to. Let's do it.
Have a good show, everybody. Here we go.
This is a safe place to talk about hard things.
Stand by. We'll count you down.
Today is going to be a changing day in your life.
5, 4.
Get ready to take care of you. How you doing? How you doing? Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We recently did a show with two young men who claimed they were forced to confess to murder during an undercover sting. Interrogators who extract false confessions without any real evidence, in my opinion, are no longer police. Now, before we unpack two more cases, here's a look at the case of Atif Rifai. Atif Rifai has been sitting in prison for 28 years for crimes he says he did not commit.
North, see what are you reporting? I need an ambulance. Okay, well, just calm down. What's the problem? The two, my friends, his mom and dad, we think they're dead.
The Royal Canadian Mounted Police developed an undercover investigative technique called the Mr. Big technique. What they'll do is the police officers disguise themselves as underworld figures. And the crime boss starts telling them things like, we know that you committed a murder and now you've put our whole organization in jeopardy by associating with us, so just tell us what happened. And they've got one mission, and that mission is to extract a confession.
They're coming up here. Here's your friend. If you want my help, you have to do as I say, and well, I want your help. It's going to save you and your friend from jail.
Now, months into the sting, Mr. Big finally got confessions from the teens. In 2004, they both received 3 life sentences after being found guilty of the multiple murder of Atif's family.
I've lost half my life. The people who killed my parents have never been brought to justice. And I've spent the last 20 years trying to get a court to take notice of that.
These are the kind of techniques that when you deploy these on teenagers, right? These kids were 19. You increase the risk of false confessions exponentially.
When you get these false confessions, you know almost always that there's prosecutorial abuse has taken place.
In Atif's case, there's a rock-solid alibi like none I've ever seen. People assume far too often, once you get a confession, even if it doesn't make sense, you must be guilty.
What were you telling yourself when you said, okay, I want to tell them what they want to hear?
We fully believe that if we didn't go along with this plan, we would end up dead.
Towards you, do the dirty deed.
Yeah.
He's just changing his story as he's being pressed by the undercover officer.
There was overwhelming doubt from day one. There's airtight alibis. There's no physical evidence. And yet, they zeroed in on these kids.
Atif is under the impression that if he didn't confess, these mobsters just might kill him.
Why did you do this?
Well, I guess the reason we did anything was to, I guess, set ourselves up so that we could, I guess, become experience with process and that's fun.
When you're doing this and you're putting all this time, effort, and energy into this, the real perpetrators are still out there walking around. This is a screw-up of major proportion. This next case should have you just as outraged. Terrell Swift, was 17 years old when Chicago police officers asked him to come down to the station. He says the police lied to him during an interrogation, accusing him of raping and murdering a woman with 3 other teens. Now, Terrell, a member of the so-called Inglewood Four, spent more than a decade in prison for a crime he did not commit. That's not a matter of opinion. He did not commit the crime. He was exonerated in 2012 based on DNA evidence. Take a look.
We all of us got one thing in common. We did an extensive amount of time in jail for something we didn't do, and that's the bottom line.
They each were sentenced to terms that range from 15 years to life. Terrell Swift, Michael Saunders, Vincent Thames, and Harold Richardson were convicted in 1 rape and murder. All were found guilty based solely on confessions. Terrell Swift was 17, was still in high school, had never been in serious trouble, when another teenager from his neighborhood implicated him, Vincent, Michael, and Harold in the rape and murder of a 30-year-old prostitute named Nina Glover.
Did anyone ask you, Terrell Swift, did you murder this woman?
That was the first thing they said. Whoa, raped and beat who? Nina, I don't know Nina Glover. Can I get my mother in here so I can get a lawyer? And nothing.
Terrell voluntarily turned himself in to police and was placed in an interrogation room surrounded by several detectives. The questioning, he said, lasted for over 12 hours.
How close were they? Show me physically how close were they.
Like right here, you're gonna die in jail, you're never going home.
Mm-hmm. Yelling at you?
Yelling at me.
Were you scared? Did you cry?
Absolutely. I was crying, but no one listened.
Police told him if he admitted to the rape and murder, he could leave. So he signed a 21-page confession which gave specific details to how he and his co-defendants committed the crime.
Everything that's in that confession was fed to us, myself and my co-defendant, by the police.
Terrell Swift would later recant, but it was too late. At trial, a judge believed the confession and sentenced him to 30 years.
Well, Terrell, proud to meet you.
Glad to meet you. Glad to meet you.
How, as you look back at this now, you were 17.
Yes.
Did you know to ask for an attorney when they started questioning you?
Once they started accusing me of rape and a murder, I immediately asked for an attorney, immediately asked for my mother, and both fell on deaf ears.
And so you asked for a lawyer, and what'd they say?
Nothing. You're never going to see your mother again, pretty much.
I mean, you know, this happened to Terrell, right? Back in 1995 was the year of the interrogations. Yeah. And here's the thing, right? Back in the day, there weren't laws in Illinois requiring videos inside the interrogation room. So everything that happened to Terrell, his request for a lawyer, their response to it was all in the shroud of secrecy of the interrogation room. We've been working on those reforms. We've gotten now up to 30
But he did have
states.
Miranda rights.
He sure did have Miranda rights. He exercised those Miranda rights. Right. He sure did, even at age 17. And you know, not a lot of 17-year-olds would know to do that.
Right, and when you say that, Miranda rights, right? When you have a vulnerable 17-year-old kid where you're just telling them they're going to die in jail, you're never going home, and you tell them you have the right to remain silent, and you're sitting there like, I'm innocent. What do you mean? Be quiet. No, you need to hear what I have to say because I'm innocent.
You felt like you could explain things away.
Absolutely.
You got the wrong guy. Here, let me just explain things, and you'll take me back to the house and apologize.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely, you know, a regret that I dealt with for years, you know, blaming my 17-year-old self for being so vulnerable. But, you know, thankfully I got over that. But, yeah, absolutely.
Did they feed you details?
They fed me all the details. I didn't know anything about this case.
You go from being at home to being in a police car to signing a confession.
Yeah.
What was the dynamic? How did they get you to do that?
When you're pleading to these officers that you didn't do this, and that you're innocent, and they're telling you, no, you did this. You're dying. You're dying in jail. I'm crying for my mother. You're never going to see your mother again. You're never going to see your family. And then they throw you in this dark-ass room, pardon my French, and have you
I think you're entitled.
You know, and have you, have you processed at 17, I'm dying. I'm in this cell like, I haven't even lived yet. What do you mean? I'm dying. And then I'm dying for something I didn't even do. Then the officer comes by and say, hey, I hear you. I know you didn't do it. Okay. And it's that quick for you to sign your life away.
And he says, you sign this and what? What will happen?
If you cooperate with me because I believe you, you'll go home. And I cooperated.
This is how it happens. The crazy thing, Terrell, too, in your case, there was DNA evidence. This is a rape and a murder, right? There was DNA evidence that was known before trial.
And
Did they ask for your DNA?
Yes. It was 5 young males, 17, 16, 15, rape and a murder, all confessed to violently raping someone, to violently beating someone. No physical evidence. And again, we're kids, right? No DNA, no nothing. And we were still taken to trial and convicted.
I think ironically, too, with Terrell's case and a lot is you got faith in the justice system is going to work. It's going to do its job. And you assume these lies about we have DNA or we have fingerprints that police are going to go investigate. So your confession's meaningless because the investigation will prove your innocence, and then that never happens.
So how did Terrell finally get released? We're going to talk about that next. And you got how many years?
I received 36 years for a crime I didn't commit.
What did you say to yourself? Now, if you've followed me at all over the last few decades, you know I am a huge proponent of law enforcement in general. I support law enforcement. I thank them for doing their jobs every day. That doesn't mean they all do a good job. Doesn't mean they all should have a badge. There are a lot of people walking around with a badge and a gun that should have neither. And there are those that do things under that flag that embarrass the hundreds of thousands of men and women who wear the uniform, and that's too bad, and there's no excuse for it. We need to do a better job of selecting and monitoring. And when something happens like this, shame on them, no question about it. Terrell says the police were threatening him, telling him he was going to die in jail for raping a woman he didn't even know, never met, never seen, never encountered. DNA science was well established at this point. You have evidence as to whether he was there or whether he wasn't. And they had this before trial. And yet still with this confession, which, and all of you sitting there right now are probably thinking, there's no way I would confess to a crime that I didn't commit. But I can tell you particularly when you're young, and you're isolated, and you have authority figures that are threatening you, and particularly those that are saying, you go forward with this, you can get life. You could get the death penalty. You could get all of these horrible things. Or you could do this, and you at least have a chance to take another breath of free air someday in your life. I mean, it's like a coin toss, and you're thinking, well, that's tough, particularly when you don't have resources. And Terrell says his DNA evidence wasn't given in court, just his false confessions. There's DNA evidence that is really exculpatory and is not given in court. How is that possible?
These cases are so often train wrecks, right? From start to finish, you've got deceptive interrogation techniques being used on isolated children. You've got lawyers who don't know how to defend these cases, right? You've got sometimes defense lawyers who say, well, my client confessed, I don't know what to do. But in this case and in so many of these other cases, there is rock solid forensic evidence. We know of hundreds of cases of confessions that have been proven false with DNA. This is still going on today because these techniques that Terrell is describing and that were used on Brendan Dassey and so many others, those techniques are still being taught way too often today.
Was there a jury trial?
No, I took a bench trial.
And you got how many years?
I received 36 years.
What did you say to yourself?
When I received the time, I was already numb from when I got found guilty, because I got found guilty like 2 months before, and then I was going to receive my time. I was still numb from being found guilty for a crime I didn't commit.
And how were you finally exonerated?
Through the DNA evidence that was there, we were finally able to get that tested to see whose DNA it was. Because back in '96, it was just preliminary DNA testing where you can only test our source and then the victim or whatever, or the assailant. But in, I want to say 2008, they started the CODIS data bank, where they started storing the convicted criminals' DNA to see if, you know, if their DNA matches to another crime. And the DNA that was actually at the scene, we fought in court to get that DNA actually tested.
And it took almost a year to get it.
It took almost a year and a half to get it tested, and we won that and found out we finally got a DNA match.
Wow.
To the convicted rapist, murderer, who was actually at the crime scene, 7 a.m. when the victim was found, lived 20 blocks away, was interviewed by the police, like I said he did not know her, and just had a violent history against women. I have to say this man did less time for a sexual assault and a murder with a violent history than we did as kids, 15, 16 to 17 with no record. He did less time than us for a rape and a murder than we did for the crimes that he committed.
So when they found the right guy,
he's deceased. He was deceased. Yeah. Huh?
Well, we'll tell you who was guilty of this crime when we come back. You're not going to believe the rest of the story. How many times has he been arrested?
I can't even count.
83. I wonder how many other people took a fall while this guy was going in and out of the jail like a revolving door. All right, Terrell, tell us about the man who was finally convicted of this crime.
Yeah, once we finally got the DNA, we fought to get the DNA tested. We matched to a guy named Johnny Douglas.
And how many times has he been arrested?
I can't even count.
83.
Yeah.
And how many times has he been convicted?
Quite a bit.
38. Many of which were sexual assaults and violent attacks on women. So within 20 blocks of this crime scene, you've got somebody that would seem to me to be a pretty good candidate. Yeah. But instead, you arrest 4 teenagers, and Terrell here has not one blemish on his record, and he gets 30-something years. I wonder how many other people took a fall while this guy was going in and out of the jail like a revolving door. And other people were being arrested and hammered because they couldn't fight back. Now, you turned this around and sued.
Yes.
Right? Who?
The state of Illinois, the city of Chicago, Cook County. There was quite a few of them. I'm thankful, now, Dr. Phil, that, I came through that situation with a clean bill of health, my head on straight, and I'm able to make change. I'm able to, correct some of the things that happened to me moving forward so that this doesn't keep happening to another Terrell Swift, Michael Saunders, Brendan Dassey, all these other cases where you have police manipulation and deceptive practices. And what you spoke on, I have to say this, when we first started, it's the community safety issue that I think gets really overlooked. Even if you want to disregard us, right, the exonerees who have done time wrongfully, which is kind of hard for me to say that, but the real killer or the real perpetrator is still running the streets to continuously harm the communities. And in my case, this man was a terror in our community, and they did nothing.
83 arrests.
Yeah.
I think it's important too, because Terrell's too humble to say this, but he's been an inspiration and a motivation for change across the country. I mean, we've had a chance to interact together as a team, and he's helped testify to change legislation in states across the country. His story helps our team motivate law enforcement to change. So his impact just has this ripple effect that doesn't stop, and I think that's important to know.
Yeah. And why? And why aren't people talking about this? Why? We're obviously here talking about it, but why are people talking about this? It needs to be talked about. We need to hold these people accountable. Aren't y'all glad to learn this today, to know this is going on? I mean, this is something you need to know. When we come back, Brendan Dassey's confession came into question when we all tuned in to the docuseries Making a Murderer. Now, Laura is going to talk about it, and we're going to find out why he's still sitting in prison today.
New developments in the Making a Murderer case. An appeals court ruled Brendan Dassey's confession featured in the Netflix series was coerced.
We have the evidence, Brendan. We just need you to be honest with us. Tell us where she was shot. I'm just going to come out and ask you who shot her in the head.
Did you bully a confession out of this boy? Closed captioning provided by... Several years ago, Netflix Making a Murderer was all anyone could talk about. We covered it on a couple of episodes and had major players, Stephen Avery's attorney, the prosecutor, one of the interrogators. Take a look. I'm talking about Making a Murderer, which told the story of Stephen Avery and his nephew Brendan, who were both found guilty of the murder of Teresa Halbach. Was Brendan's confession coerced?
We have the evidence, Brendan. We just need you to be honest with us.
None of the statements that Brendan gave were coerced.
Tell us where she was shot.
In the head.
No, I mean where? In the garage, outside, in the house?
In the garage.
Did you bully a confession out of this boy?
No, I did not.
All right, I'm just going to come up and ask you who shot her in the head.
He did.
Tell us about that then.
He shot her with his .22.
When you were with him, there was not a lawyer there and there was not a parent there. Is that odd?
He's not a suspect. He's not a charged defendant. He's not entitled to a lawyer. He could have asked for one. He chose not to have one.
New developments in the Making a Murderer case. An appeals court ruled Brendan Dassey's confession featured in the Netflix series was coerced. The judges also said the 27-year-old should be tried or released from prison. Prosecutors will seek to repeal the court's decision.
Brendan Dassey's legal team is announcing today they're petitioning the governor of Wisconsin to grant him clemency.
He has spent almost half his life behind bars. We're filing a petition for executive clemency with Governor Tony Evers of Wisconsin.
Is that all that's left?
We got a lot of fight left. We got a lot of fight left for someone like Brendan Dassey. Yes. The path ahead for Brendan, I've been representing him for 15 years, him and a lot of other good people like Terrell who falsely confessed. And the path for those folks in the legal system is almost impossible. This confession was coerced, was unreliable, but the last round of the appeals, we lost by a single vote. Not because Brendan was guilty. No one said that. Just because these techniques weren't clear enough against the law. So, yeah.
I'll guarantee you right now, if I went and got him out of his cell and asked him what he confessed to, he didn't have any more idea than a goose what he confessed to.
So Brendan Dassey, right, this happened in 2006 was his interrogation. 16-year-old, special education student, IQ around 70, profound deficits when it comes to whether he can understand speech, how well he could use speech, how well he could understand speech. You bring that kid alone inside an interrogation room. No mom, no dad, no lawyer. You question him like they did 4 times over a period of 48 hours. I'm amazed he held out as long as he did.
Well, we have a portion of Brendan's interrogation. Let's take a listen to police when they pulled Brendan out of class.
We've got people back at the Sheriff's Department, District Attorney's Office, that are looking at this now saying, there's no way that Brendan Dassey is out there and they see something. They're talking about trying to link Brendan Dassey with this event. They're saying Brendan had something to do with it or cover up of it, which would be Brendan Dassey could potentially be facing charges for that.
So this is made up, right? There was no one at the Sheriff's Department, no one at the District Attorney's Office that was looking at Brendan because there was no evidence tying him to this crime. But this is how they start out, by scaring this vulnerable 16-year-old with a lie. You could get murder charges, Brendan. That's how this kicks off, and it just goes downhill from there.
Yeah, you can imagine how scared he had to be. When we come back, we're going to hear what interrogators told him before they pulled him down to the station. Let's look at another clip of Brendan's interrogation where the interrogator promises to not charge Brendan if he cooperates. Listen.
We want to go back and tell people that, Brendan told us. We want to be able to tell people that Brendan was honest. It's not like Steve. He's honest. He's a good guy. He's going to go places in this life. But in order for us to do that, you need to be honest with us. And so far, you're not being 100% honest. We'll go to bat for you, but you have to be honest with us.
Because Mark and I looked at the tapes, looked at the notes, and it's real obvious there's some places where some things were left out or maybe changed just a bit to maybe looking at yourself to protect yourself a little. From what I'm seeing, even if I fill those in, I'm thinking you're all right. Okay, you don't have to worry about things. We're there for you, and we know what Stephen did, and we know kind of what happened to you when he did. We just need to hear the whole story from you. And as soon as we get that, we're comfortable with that, I think you're going to be a lot more comfortable with that. It's going to be a lot easier on you down the road if this goes to trial and stuff like that.
Honesty here, Brendan, is the thing that's going to help you. Okay, no matter what you did, we can work through that. Okay? We can't make any promises, but we'll stand behind you no matter what you did. Okay?
Just tell us. We got you. We got your back.
That's right. So first you've got the fake charges, right? You're telling this kid with no record, no hint of violence in his pinky finger that he's staring down murder charges. At one point, these officers even say to Brendan, they say to him, I'm a cop, but I'm not right now. I'm a father. I've got a kid your age. Right? I mean, this is the kind of deceptive situation that Brendan found himself in.
And if you think the authority doesn't kick in, watch him as he tries to guess at what they want.
Where did he stab her?
In the stomach.
What else did he do to her? He did something else. We know that. What else?
He tied her up.
We know he did something else to her. What else did he do to her?
He choked her.
We have the evidence, Brendan. We just need you to be honest with us.
That he cut off her hair.
Okay, what else?
What else was done to her head?
That he punched her.
What else? What else?
He made you do something to her, didn't he? So he would feel better about not being the only person, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What did he make you do to her?
What did he make you do, Brendan? It's okay. What did he make you do?
Cut her.
Cut her where?
On her throat.
What else happens to her in her head?
Extremely, extremely important you tell us this. for us to believe you.
Come on, Brendan. What else?
We know, we just need you to tell us.
That's all I can remember.
All right, I'm just going to come out and ask you. Who shot her in the head?
He did.
Why didn't you tell us that?
Because I can't think of it.
Why didn't you tell us that? Because you hadn't told me yet.
So the day before this interrogation, they finally found out she'd been shot in the head. And that's why they're going after Brendan so hard. If he knows to say that she'd been shot in the head, right? That's information that only the real killer would know. If he could come up with that on his own, that is game, set, match. He's guilty. Instead, you see him guessing every way of killing someone that he can think. Even at one point, he's so at sea, he says, we cut off her hair.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
He is guessing and guessing and can't come up with the right answer until they have to tell him the right answer.
When we come back, we'll see what happened after Brendan confesses. Laura says, well, it's just really heartbreaking. Brendan Dassey is still sitting in prison for the murder of Teresa Halbach. His attorney, Laura Nyrider, claims Brendan's confession was coerced, unjust. Let's take a look at how naively Brendan trusted his interrogators. All he wanted to do was go back to class.
Am I going to be at school before school ends?
Probably not. I mean, we're at 2:30 already, and school's over at what, 3?
3:05?
No.
What time will this be done?
Well, we're pretty much done. We have a couple follow-up things to ask you, but it's pretty much done. You do understand that you're under arrest now?
So could I call my girlfriend and tell her that I couldn't come today?
We'll give you an opportunity to do that, okay? Did you kind of, I mean, honestly, after telling us what you told us, you kind of figured this was coming? Yeah?
This is only for 1 day or...
Where do you think you're going?
Oh.
You're going to juvie. That's where you're going, to a juvie jail, about 45 minutes away.
Yeah, but I have a question.
What's that?
What happens if he says something, like his story is different, but he says he admits to doing it?
What do you mean?
Like, if his story's like different, like, I never did nothing or something.
Did you? Huh?
Not really.
What do you mean, not really?
They got to my head.
Wow. You know, when you look at this, you can imagine this family at home talking about this. They're just not deep in resources.
Here's a kid who just confessed to rape and murder, who's asking to go back to school so he can finish his project in 6th hour. Why does he think he can go back to school? Because that's what they said, right? We'll help you out, right? We're the good guys. You're going to have nothing to worry about if you just fill in those blanks.
Yeah. He totally doesn't get the gravity of this situation.
When his mom finally comes in, right, he says to her, I didn't really do this. And she says, well, what do you mean? He says, they got to my head. That is Brendan, with all of his limitations and disabilities, trying his best to tell his mom what just happened to him, right? The things that we saw on the video. And what's so crucial about the fact that this was caught on video, all of this interrogation, right? Because we know Brendan wouldn't be able, I don't think, to tell us in his own words what happened to him. Thank God we have this video. Yeah. This video is now serving as a teaching, as a training tool for so many officers around the country who are learning from Brendan Dassey's case.
Yeah. Well, you know, I've said I've spent a lot of my professional career in the litigation arena, and I'm not an attorney. Don't mean to brag, but I'm not. No offense. But I looked at the psychological aspects of these trials and the dynamics that went on, everything from interrogation, questioning, witness prep, jury dynamics. And this weighs heavily on me. And I'm going to give you my final thoughts about this and what it means to all of us and what our duties are. Final thoughts when we come back. January 9th, 1997, Richard Glossop was just working hard and spending time with the people that loved him when, bam, he was arrested, convicted, and sentenced to die by lethal injection for a murder he did not commit. 26 years later, and after having had his last meal 4 times, Richard Glossop still sits on death row in Oklahoma. April 3rd, 1997, Bastrop, Texas. Just 4 months later, Rodney Reed was arrested for the murder of a white girl he was seeing. Her real boyfriend, a white cop, who would later spend 10 years in prison for kidnap and rape, was never even presented as a suspect. This cop boyfriend was with her the night of her death. Rodney Reed was not. Yet 1 year after his arrest, May 28, 1998, an all-white jury sentenced Reed to die. He sits on death row today, again, for over 25 years. What astounds me most, neither of these individuals or several other inmates I work with are bitter, hostile, angry, or vengeful. Every one of them says, hey, I'm alive, and I have learned a lot about humility and humanity. But all of you tell me what's gone wrong in your life in the last 26 years. Tell me about your obnoxious mother-in-law. Tell me about your being behind on your mortgage. Tell me about your ridiculous gas prices, about being overcrowded in a small apartment, about how tired you are raising children alone, having to take the bus, cook dinner, wear last season's shoes, or not getting enough likes on your social media pages. But if you tell me that, then tell me what a blessing it is to not exist in a tiny 6x8 cell with no window, no one to talk to, no open door, or how blessed you are that death is not waiting outside your door to choke the very life out of you when you know you did nothing wrong. How blessed are you to have the issues that at least have a chance of solution, a chance of help and support, a chance to wake up tomorrow with hope, hope to have a better day, hope to be seen and heard, hope that God didn't say, I don't see you, I can't hear you, I won't help you. These people like Richard and Rodney and others eaten up by the system and prosecutorial abuse, have no hope. They have no voice. If they did, would anyone listen? Would you listen? We have judges and woke DAs who fail to enforce the law against people who are known to be violent criminals, and they're turning them loose because they have, quote, had it tough, allowing them to do what they do. The best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. This is not rocket science. They do it as though allowing them to victimize more people will somehow be curative. It won't. It's just idiotic. It's stupid. Ask Elizabeth Gomes, attacked by a repeat violent offender, released within hours of another arrest, or Olympian Kim Glass, or Assistant District Attorney Irene Lee, both attacked by the same repeat offender. Different day, different time, same person. We are sensitive to their rights, but not those of the innocent. I ask, what are you paying attention to? Do you notice if your officials are locking up the innocent and turning loose the violent? Are you substituting common sense for woke, bleeding heart theories that seem high-minded but don't work in the real world? Do you care about results versus in vogue policies? When you hear Rodney's story, Richard's story, do you care, really care enough to take action? If they are innocent, as my expertise leads me to conclude 100%, will their deaths matter? Will you even notice when they splatter against the windshield of your life? Will you be more concerned with someone appropriating your culture as opposed to them being erased from their own culture completely? Or maybe someone falling behind on the can't say that list. Do you care? Can you say, I see you, I hear you? You may have been told you do not matter. I say you do. Can you say, I see you, when their family member is lying in the ER with brain damage because they tried to end their own life, because they were bullied and shamed, because their brother was wrongfully convicted. Can you say, I see you? My God, I hope so, for all of our sakes. I hope we're all taking caring action. But hey, maybe we're too busy posting selfies and videos of ourselves brushing our teeth. What's really important? I say what we've talked about today is really important. Be safe. We'll see you next time.